Hello everyone. So I don't know how long this video is going to be because I really need to clear out storage space on my phone. Oopsie. But I just wanted to start off by saying Happy New Year, everybody. Hopefully this year is definitely better than the last one because, whoo, last year sucked ass. It really did. I don't know if it's all going to be repaired this year, but I at least hope for some kind of semblance of normality to return this year. Don't know where, don't know when, but let's hope it comes. Anyway, last time I did a video, I went over all of the stuff I got for Christmas, which was cool. But what I wanted to do today was to go over two specific films that I had rewatched recently. One was like these were both rewatches that I did over Christmas break. One was of a movie that I just saw for the first time this year. Another one was of one that I saw in 2019, like right at the beginning of that year, that I've kind of come around onto. Over the Christmas season, like I would say starting between Black Friday and before New Year's, I was able to get some movies. I already went over two of them that I got on Christmas Day, Irishman and Tenet. This is actually going to be one of the ones we're going to be talking more in depth about today. And some of the other stuff, before Christmas, I got this on Black Friday, the 1995 Ghost in the Shell. Incredible film, still one of my all-time favorites. And then after Christmas, my mom and I went to Best Buy and we got some movies there. I bought two, she bought one. The one she bought was Aquaman. This movie rules. And the two that I bought were Luca Guadagnino's remake of Suspiria and Deadpool 2. I figure I might as well buy both because this is slowly starting to become hard to get in the United States. It can be hard to find copies, and Best Buy just had 2 or 3 of these lying around for like $10, so I figured screwed, might as well get one. And this is also going to be one of the other movies we're talking about today. And I got Deadpool 2 because, well, I'm getting paranoid about what's going to happen in the X-Men movies, so might as well get that. But the films I wanted to talk about more specifically today were these two. Both of these I watched just before New Year's. I rewatched this one on Christmas Day, and I watched this one on New Year's Eve. And both films I have interesting reactions to. I want to go over the one that's a little less complicated feelings first, which is Tenet. Ironically enough, I don't have entirely complicated feelings on this one for such a densely complicated movie. This was my second viewing. The first time I saw it was back in September, just a day before my birthday, and I had a total blast with it. I saw it with a couple of my friends, Joey and Nathan. Nathan really liked it. Joey, he was just kind of like, it's okay, even though he's a Christopher Nolan fan. I've always enjoyed Christopher Nolan's other films. Inception, Batman Begins, Dark Knight, Prestige, Interstellar, Dunkirk. Like he's a really, really terrific filmmaker. I do kind of feel like he kind of peaked with Inception though, and since then he hasn't been able to make a movie that clicks with me the same way that film did, because what he did there was genuinely revelatory. Like it just felt like that was a film that showed what he's truly capable of as a filmmaker. And since then, I don't think he's ever going to be able to get that back. All the subsequent films he's done since then are good, oftentimes very good, but just not quite as good as Inception was. Dark Knight Rises I've kind of come around to. I think it's a gigantic mess, but it is entertaining. It's not boring. Interstellar is gooey and sentimental and excessive as hell, but it is, it's extremely watchable and highly entertaining. And even I'll admit that I kind of get caught up in the sentimentality of it. And Dunkirk is a very precise and lean World War II movie. But I have to be honest, like Tenet, for me, as densely overcomplicated as it is, as much as it's loaded with all this pseudoscience nonsense in it, even though it probably has not much in the way of character development like some of his other films do, I just find it to be such a fascinating thriller. Like, one of the things I've kind of noticed in people's reactions to it is that they're kind of approaching the film at a wrong angle. So many people kind of get caught up in the hype that it's a Christopher Nolan movie, that they're expecting something like Inception or Dunkirk or what he accomplished with the Dark Knight trilogy. And rewatching it, none of those movies really crossed my mind. Not even Inception, which even some of the actors, John David Washington, our lead character, our protagonist, said in an interview that they're like sisters. He said that Tenet's like a cousin to Inception. None of those movies really crossed my mind as I watched Inception. Not when I first saw it back in September, not when I rewatched it on Christmas. The movies that it really reminds me of is stuff like James Bond. It is fully 100% a James Bond movie. And I feel like if people got more into the mentality of that, they would honestly enjoy it more. Tenet, unfortunately, had this huge expectation behind it of being the movie that would bring back cinemas from the brink, and it really didn't. It was a divisively received, strange, somewhat abstract action thriller that I don't even think that, even if it was released in normal circumstances, the reception for it would have been, super glowing either. It's too strange. It's too enigmatic and dense for it, for it to be widely accepted. That being said, for my personal taste, I think it's a fascinating action thriller. And it's also kind of a weird contradiction of a movie. Here's a movie that densely explains itself, what it's all about, how much it's about the flow of time, reversing it, going forwards and backwards, about this secret agent who finds himself, about this CIA agent who finds himself recruited into this mysterious shadow organization that's trying to preserve the flow of time. And it's this movie where it's almost like you're playing on a chessboard, and the chessboard keeps refolding itself and changing itself around and going in different new abstract shapes every half hour, or every 10 minutes to 30 minutes. And I'll even admit, after a certain point, I don't understand what the hell is going on in this movie. I've seen art films that make more sense than that. I follow much more clearly than this. I could sit down, watch Under the Skin, and be like, yeah, I know exactly what's going on there. Tenet, I swear to God, after a certain point, I'm just like, I have no fucking clue what the hell is going on. Can someone, and even if someone were to explain to me what's going on, I still wouldn't understand it. But as the movie says, it even outright says this at one point, very early on, don't try to understand it, feel it. I have to admit, I sort of get with that feeling. Like, I don't understand it completely, but I'm certainly having a grand time watching all of this crazy spectacle happen on display. Just getting caught up in its mood and the obvious Bond tropes that it indulges in, and the beautiful scenery and the spectacular action and all the fun performances and the incredible score by Ludwig Göransson. And speaking of the performances, the cast here is uniformly excellent. There's not one false note here. John David Washington, son of Denzel, I haven't seen him in some of the other stuff he's been in. Like, I know he had a stint in the HBO series Ballers, and he was the lead character in Spike Lee's Black Klansman. I haven't seen any of those. This is my first real exposure to him, but I have to say, he was terrific for playing a character that we really don't know a whole lot about. He's just simply referred to as the protagonist. He has no name, no backstory. We get a couple little hints of his backstory, that he's like former CIA, but we just kind of see him as a protagonist who's just reacting to all the strange stuff that's happening around him. And I gotta say, he's got good chops. He's not exactly as magnetic as his father, but he has this different kind of charisma that makes him interesting to watch on screen. And he's also nicely balanced by Robert Pattinson, who's just been on a wonderful string of weird roles for the past couple of years. ever since he got away from Twilight, he's been in stuff like a couple of David Cronenberg movies, The Lost City of Z, Good Time, The Lighthouse, and this is another film we can add right to that repertoire. He plays his accomplice in all this weirdo time shenanigan stuff, Neil, who's a lot more of an enigmatic character. Like, it's like he says more than he lets on. You don't know exactly what his deal is. He's definitely a good guy, but like some of the details around him are even more mysterious than the protagonists. There's also other actors who show up here. Elizabeth Debicki plays the typical Bond girl. She's really good, but some kind of felt was a thankless role. I really didn't feel like it. She had presence. She had urgency. She goes through a lot of shit in the movie. And then you've got Kenneth Branagh as the main villain, Andrei Sator, complete with a silly Russian accent and everything, and he is a scary goddamn villain. He is like, every time he has a real genuine menace about himself. Even like anytime his motif plays, it's like this like raspy, distorted breathing, and this that goes in the music cue, like he hears like you hear that, it's like, oh Christ, he's here. And he is a legitimately scary villain, and his motives for doing what he's doing is at once petty, nihilistic, and it's just so egocentric. Like it's almost like the perfect Bond villain motivation. He wants to blow up not essentially blow up the world, but blow up the fabric of time, because he's slowly dying of cancer, and he refuses to let the world, he refuses to let the flow of time go on without him. He is such a wonderfully despicable villain. Aaron Taylor Johnson and Michael Caine also show up in supporting roles. They're fun to watch. Aaron Taylor Johnson is obviously playing the role that Nolan probably would have cast Tom Hardy in, but Tom Hardy was probably busy. Nolan was like, all right, let me get that dude who was in Godzilla and Kick-Ass. There's a lot of other things I can say about Tenet, and I'll fully admit to whatever problems or flaws it has. I completely understand if someone dislikes it, or if they just think it's complete nonsense or hogwash. To an extent, I'll even agree with those criticisms, but it's just a movie that I just find so highly watchable and so fun and so strange. I don't know if we're going to continue getting blockbusters like this anytime soon, especially with the state of the film industry right now and its push more towards streaming ventures, and the fact that Christopher Nolan and Warner Brothers got into a bit of a spat earlier in regards to the HBO Max thing. I don't know what's going to go on there, but I hope we keep on seeing more movies like this. I want to see Christopher Nolan keep making more movies. I do hope that he does scale down sometime soon, because I almost kind of feel like he's starting to make movies that are almost like a little too big, to the point in which like it just doesn't seem like he can fully control them anymore like he used to. This is definitely one where it just kind of feels like it's completely out of control, even from him. But I do hope we at least get blockbusters that are this strange and ambitious. Also, as for the disc quality, I haven't looked at the special features, but I can definitely confirm that the visuals and audio look and sound absolutely terrific. There was a lot of criticism at the time that this film was released, that a lot of people had issues understanding what the hell characters were saying. The screening I went to, they must have modified the volume or something, because everything sounded pitch perfect. I could understand a majority of the dialogue most of the time. There were no moments like when I was watching, like when I saw Interstellar, there were moments in that movie where it's like my ears just kind of like I had to go, like it was that pulverizingly loud. But I never really had any of those instances with this or Dunkirk, so it's just me. I can only imagine what the hell this looks like in 4K. It probably looks outstanding. Anyway, that's it for Tenet. If you haven't purchased a copy already, and if you have an interest in the movie, I suggest, like, for people who are definitely fans of either the director or of the film itself, go right ahead. Like, this is a good purchase, and I almost kind of feel like this movie needs as much money as it can get because it bombed. But as for people who are more, it's like more casual viewers, maybe people who kind of flip flop on Christopher Nolan, or even fans, people who are just casual fans, or people just looking for like stuff, something to just blow up. Wait to rent this, because I think it might be a bit much. You might either find it immensely boring or utterly incomprehensible or what. I've I'll admit that it might be incomprehensible, but it's not fucking boring. Anyway, that's it for Tenet now. Next up, for the more complicated feeling movie. Okay, so I have a bit of a journey with this one. I should probably start with the film that it's based off of. Oh, before I begin, this is Suspiria, directed by Luca Guadagnino, written by David Kangich. Kajigenge? I don't know how to pronounce his name. It stars Dakota Johnson, Tilda Swinton, Mia Goth, Chloe Grace Moretz, and it's a remake of the classic 1977, I think it is, 1977 original Suspiria by Dario Argento, which was a horror film about witches that run a dance academy and all the spooky stuff that goes on in it. I have to confess, I am not much of a fan of the original Suspiria. I think it is a loud, obnoxious, plotless, thin as hell movie that just, like, I know many people love it for precisely for the filmmaking and its bold colors and such, but for me, I remember when I was really young, I tried watching it, I couldn't get through it. I watched it again years later, older, and I was struggling to get through it. That movie, it's just not for me, even though it's considered one of the greatest horror films ever made. It's just not for me. I think it's a kind of a shrill and obnoxious movie. It's pretty, and when we finally get to the half hour of that thing, that's when things start cooking. But outside of that, I was just like, no, I don't like this at all. This is an annoying movie. This remake, when it was announced, I was actually kind of more open to it than most people were, because I'm like, yeah, I couldn't make it through the first time of that, so I'm more than willing to see anyone else give it a shot. And this is actually my first film I've seen by Luca Guadagnino. I haven't seen Call Me by Your Name or A Bigger Splash or what was that other movie he did with Tilda Swinton? I Am Love, I think it was called. I haven't seen any of his other work, so this is my first exposure to what he's done. And when reviews came in, I was fascinated at the response that it was getting, and I'm so hyped to see it, but it didn't play around in my area, so I had to wait months and months on end for it to finally be available to rent. And when I rented it and watched it, for the first 2 hours, I was utterly entranced by the film. But then the final half hour happened, and I was so disappointed in it. I did not like the execution of the climax at all. I thought it was tonally against of what the movie was going for. I thought it was just cheesy and ridiculous in comparison to how gritty and serious it was at the beginning. It gave me some serious whiplash, and I felt like I couldn't properly escape from it. After rewatching it again, however, in its entirety, I was sorry, it's just a little hard to think about it. I mean, it's easy to think about. It's just my feelings on this are weird. I was able to get over that hump. I was able to get over that issue that I had with it. Something about the film in its final third, I was able to look past the sillier aspects of it, like the ridiculous makeup jobs and the like over the top gore and CG effects that happened in the final third, and I saw something else in that final third. What I saw was a film that was just so deeply about sadness and pain and guilt and all that, and femininity and power and resisting fascism, and all of those aspects came together in that ending. I had seen all those themes before, both in this viewing and the previous and my first viewing, but when I saw that, it just, I'm sorry if my words are kind of jumbled right now. This is a very complex film. Like, it may be more narratively coherent than the other movie I just talked about, but it tackles so many themes. The setting of what the film takes place in is that it takes place in 1970s Berlin when the wall was still up, and it's all about kind of like the divisions going on in the coven between what direction that they should take, what should they do, what's going on with their leaders, and this young girl named Susie Bannon, who's always been a fan of the like musical troupe, like of their dancers and such, like finally gets a chance to finally go abroad and be a part of the company, and she ends up actually getting accepted into their coven rather gracefully. There's something about her aura that just like she's immediately attracted to. She senses it. And then there's another plot going on with this psychologist, Dr. Josef Klemper, played by Tilda Swinton. Yeah, Tilda Swinton's playing in 3 different roles in this. It's great. I won't say what the third one is, but the other 2, it's like she's looking normal as like the head of the theater, and then with this character, she plays this psychologist who's like a survivor of World War II, and he feels immense guilt for what happened to his wife a long time ago. He's a nice guy, and like an intelligent fellow, but he's also somebody who is dismissive of things, even when stuff is going bad for women. It kind of shows that he's sort of stuck in his own cycle. He was dismissive of his wife's fears of the Nazis, and he is dismissive of some of the dancers' warnings about the stuff going on within this coven. And when he finally figures it out, kind of bites him in the ass. And it's a film about so many things. It's about division. It's about how politics work in a witch's coven. They're actually kind of fascinating. It's about the period that it was set in. It's about femininity. It's about art. It's about expressing both of those things. It's about power. It's about guilt, shame, motherhood. It tackles so many themes and ideas, but it never feels bogged down or messy. It feels so structurally tight and coherent. Despite the card that says, Amazon Studio presents a tale, like a tale of divided Berlin in 6 acts and an epilogue. I never really got the whole, 6-act thing. To me, it felt like that was just something they just put on for dressing. To me, it felt like a 3-act movie. And despite the running time, 152 minutes, it never feels slow. It never feels slow at all. This thing is like a freight train in terms of pacing. It just zooms by things, but it never goes by so fast that you can't absorb the information. It goes by at a pace where it's like it allows you to absorb it, and it always keeps your interest even when none of the horror stuff actually happens, which when the horror stuff does happen, it is utterly gruesome and terrifying. There's a sequence in it where one girl is pretty much turned into a human pretzel. It is one of the most graphic and fucked up things ever put in a movie, probably in the last couple of years. Myself, the first time I saw that sequence, I was horrified like everyone else was, but on this subsequent viewing, I was actually just kind of more fascinated at the effects work and the even kind of artful way that scene was done rather than the absolute horror of it. Perhaps that might be a failure on the film's part, but I really didn't see it as that. And if anything, this film is actually kind of a technical masterwork in terms of visual effects and makeup effects. For a film that was only made on a budget of $20 million, it doesn't show at all. And I loved the period detail that the film goes into, and the costume designs, and like some of the choices that they do in art direction. Like it and the sound design is so unbelievably sharp in some sequences. Not just in that, but it's like during the dances, which the dance, the ballet that they do, it's this like strange interpretive kind of dance sort of routine with these almost like shibari type costumes, and watching it is so strange and abstract but just fascinating, and it's like you're like pulled into it, and it's like you're hearing like all these sharp breathings and moans throughout them. It's the film is also highly sexual despite like not really kind of being I mean it is about sexuality, but it's like there's nothing about it that feels like it's being exploitative or uh, like it's just doing it just to kind of get the audience off. For all the instances it has of very graphic nudity and sexual content in it, it never feels distasteful. In fact, there isn't much in the way of sexual content at all. There's like lots of graphic nudity in it, but it never felt like it was being done out of like shock or to titillate the audience. It actually felt like there was a thematic point behind it, which I don't think you can say much about other kind of films that do that. And after all was said and done, after I watched this as like my final movie of 2020, I came away from it. I don't want to, not liberated, but I was like, okay, I get it now. I I got it the first time, but I was just so distracted with how it wrapped up that it threw me off. Here, it felt like all the pieces worked together. Everything was clearer than it was the first time around. I understood what the movie was going for, and in that instance, I fell back in love with it, but from a different angle. I don't know if Luca Guadagnino will ever make another horror movie again. He did mention that he wanted to remake the other films in Dario Argento's little trilogy that connects to Suspiria, but because this was a bomb, I don't think that's going to happen. I think even he said, no, that's not going to happen. But I hope someday he does get a chance to take another stab at the horror genre, because I thought he did a tremendous job with everything here. He really, really did. His approach to the genre is something that is both genuinely artful and utterly horrifying. I think it is a horror film that can be appreciated by casual genre fans as much as like the hardcore ones and maybe the ones who have more of an artier sensibility. I think it's actually a much more accessible movie than people give it credit for, because it lays itself out so elegantly and precisely. I don't know, like I don't know exactly how hard it is to get a copy for it these days, especially when you could just as easily find it on Amazon streaming. But if you can, I highly recommend that you buy yourself a copy of this, and if you have to import a copy, fucking do it. I don't care. This is a terrific horror film. It was one of the best films of 2018, one of the best horror films of the decade for sure. I highly, highly recommend it. I recommend both films. I think if you had the, personally speaking, if you had the opportunity to watch one or the other, I think I would go with this one over this one. But like you can't go wrong with both. They're both fascinating films. Anyway, I don't know what I'm going to do next for a video, but I'll keep you posted. And another thing, I do intend to do my live streaming project this month, but it's going to be hitting a bit of a delay because, sorry, breakfast. It is going to be hitting a bit of a delay because most of the components are in, except for one piece that didn't work, the RAM. So I returned that component, and I'm getting a new one in a couple of weeks. Hopefully that one works. That'd be fantastic. And instead of Doom Eternal, like I said I was going to do, I actually changed my decision, and instead I think I might kick it off with, ironically enough, some I said I wasn't going to do because I think there's too many of them. The wide open sandbox action game Grand Theft Auto 5. Yeah, I know I'm late to the party, but better late than never, right? Anyway, I'll keep all of you posted, but anyway, Happy New Year, everybody. Here's hoping 2021 is a better year.